My daughter's fiancé looked me in the eye and said I was a useless piece of nothing. Then he smiled, the kind of smile a man gives a stray dog before kicking it off his porch. It was 8:14 p.m. on a Thursday, and the ballroom behind him was strung with 1,000 white lights I'd paid for. A quartet rehearsed Bach in the corner. I had just signed the last check for the $150,000 wedding, my girl's dream. And by sunrise the money was gone. He called it a vendor error and told me to calm down, as if a father who has spent 30 years building, mending, and paying could sit. My daughter, Ava, was 2 rooms away trying on her veil while her fiancé, Evan, kept his voice soft enough that she wouldn't hear what he told me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. You don't get it, Robert, he said, adjusting his cufflink so it flashed like a call to worship. This is the way things are done now. Money in, money out. Small businesses get confused. It'll sort itself out, old-timer. You are not helpful. Not helpful. Was I helpful when I taught my girl to drive the old Chevy in the church lot, the steering wheel slick with our summer palms? Was I helpful when I mortgaged the house after her mother's chemo ate through the savings and pretended the second job at the metal shop was a hobby? Was I helpful when I wrote the first deposit so her dream date would be available? The vendor whose brochures she slept with under her pillow like they were lullabies? He leaned in close, breath mint sweet and rotten underneath. The best thing you can do is smile. Don't make your daughter's big day about you. When he turned away, I saw the reflection of myself in the ballroom's mirrored column. Gray hair, suit 2 years old, hands too big for this place. And I heard a question form behind my ribs like a splinter pushing to the surface. How could my own daughter love a man who would speak to me like that? And then another, colder. What kind of man lets it stand? Ava called from the fitting room, light as bird song. Daddy? Can you come see? The hem's all wrong and I need your eye. I swallowed whatever answer my pride wanted to give and followed the sound of my girl. She stood on the pedestal, veil clouding her shoulders, eyes shining, and for a heartbeat the old ache eased. She was 8 again, turning once in a dress for a school recital, asking if I thought she looked brave. I told her then that brave was a feeling you put on under your clothes, the layer nearest your skin. Do I look brave, Dad? She asked now, half teasing, half hoping. I nodded and kissed her cheek. The seamstress smiled. Evan stood in the doorway as if he had always owned doorways, phone glowing in his palm. If my anger was a knife, I put the blade back in its sheath. Not yet. Not in front of her. Revenge, if it deserved the name, could not be a messy thing that splashed onto the white of her. He checked his watch, then the ballroom. Robert, the manager needs you to sign for the bar upgrade, and the lighting tech wants authorization for the ceiling rig. Of course they did. Every road in this city seemed to lead through my pen. I signed what needed signing. I made small talk with men who could triple charge for ice and call it curated snow. I smiled until my cheeks trembled. And when the quartet paused, I slipped out into the service hall that smelled of coffee and floor wax and cheaper lives. I called the bank manager whose golf slice I had fixed 20-some years ago by adjusting his grip. Angie, I said, and my voice steadied. I need to know where $150,000 walked to tonight. She exhaled through her teeth. You finally bought yourself a yacht? Not exactly. Give me an hour, she said. I'll call you from my car where compliance can't listen. I ended the call to find Evan waiting in the doorway, thumbs still drumming against his phone. Old habits, he said with a lazy grin. You guys can't stop calling your little banker friends. Old habits built this whole night, I said, and they built the woman you're marrying. His grin died by a degree, and that's why you're going to stay out of my way. The seam between us closed without words. I stepped back into the light before I said something my daughter would have to live with. At 9:31, when the hall emptied and the lights dimmed for rehearsal, my phone buzzed. Angie's voice came flat. all business where we were both from. Funds moved at 8:02 p.m., Robert, she said, pushed from the escrow sub-account to 3 vendors and then swept into an LLC called Vendor Umbrella Services, routing number in Nevada. The same LLC pulled 2 earlier test transfers this week, $5,000 and $10,000, masked as floral overage. And the owner? On paper, a stack of shells. In reality? She paused. I'll text you a name. You won't like it. The name appeared a heartbeat later. Evan's brother. The one they called a consultant. I stood absolutely still while the quartet began again and the doors thudded in the distance like a tired heart. What do you want me to do? Angie asked. I looked through the glass at my daughter practicing her walk beneath the chandelier I had chosen because she said it looked like snow. How do you teach a child to tell the difference between snow and ash? How do you hold the truth without burning her? Hold the transfer, I said. Freeze the sweep on suspicion of fraud. Quietly. If anyone calls, you're unavailable until morning. That'll rattle cages. Good, I said, and my voice returned to me. It's time to see what runs out. I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. When I turned, Evan was watching from across the ballroom, head tilted as if someone had asked him to diagram a sentence. He lifted his glass toward me. A toast or a threat, I couldn't tell. That night, while the rehearsal dinner clinked and smiled, Vendor Umbrella Services tried twice to pull the rest of the funds, and twice the bank's door held. By dawn, 3 angry emails sat in the inbox of a man who had never imagined a father from the old street still had levers to pull. By breakfast, the hotel manager had received a letter from the fire marshal about occupancy checks. I'd called an old friend who missed my toolbox stories. By noon, the caterer had stumbled onto a problem with a rare fish import, and the florist suddenly couldn't remember if the peonies were certified for out-of-state transport. When the facade depends on other people's work, all you have to do is jiggle a single brick. At 2 p.m., Evan called me to a meeting with the vendors in a side conference room where the carpet pattern looked like spilled coins. Ava sat beside him, hands clasped, trying to fix a problem she couldn't see. Dad, she said, everyone's saying there's an issue with the payments. Is that true? Please tell me it's a mistake. Evan leaned back, practiced calm. Just a simple misunderstanding, sweetheart. Your father's bank flagged some transactions because he probably filled something out wrong. He's overwhelmed. It happens, Robert, the manager said with a conciliatory smile that never reached the eyes. If you could call your bank now, we can get our timeline back on track. I met my daughter's eyes and felt my throat tighten. She had her mother's way of searching a face, gentle, exacting. I'll fix what's mine to fix, I said carefully. But I won't pay thieves. Silence hit the room like weather. Evan's chair creaked. Thieves? He repeated. You're calling your daughter's vendors thieves? In front of her? Not them, I said, and turned a page in my folder until the paper whispered. The ones who opened a funnel under our table while we were saying grace. Ava shook her head as if clearing water from her ears. What funnel? Dad, I don't understand. I slid a printed screenshot of the shell LLC across the table. Evan didn't touch it. His eyes flicked from the paper to my face to Ava's mouth, measuring. If you watched closely, you could see the moment he calculated a new lie. He stood, palms open. I can't work like this. Vendors, please give us a minute. When the door closed, he let the smile fall. Let's not do this, Robert. Then undo it. What, the whole wedding? Is that your goal? Because right now that's where you're pushing us. My goal, I said, hearing steel in my own breath, is that my daughter marries a man who talks to her father like a man. You can't buy respect, he said. No, I agreed. But you can rent a stadium to watch a fool lose it. He snorted and turned away, then turned back when he realized I was still there, not flinching, not apologizing for the old ways that kept food on our table and my girl in good shoes. He reached for Ava's hand, squeezing too hard. A performance for me or for him, I couldn't know. "Baby, your dad is under a lot of stress. He's projecting. Let's step outside." She didn't move. "Why is your brother's company touching our funds?" He did a quick aggregator for the vendors, the way startups streamline. He saw my face and shifted lanes without signaling. "Look, every big event uses a financial pass-through to simplify. Your dad's from the era of paper checks, and your era steals with smoother fonts." Ava looked between us as if the room had tilted and she was the only thing not sliding. "Evan," she said softly, "tell me the truth." He did not answer. He picked up his phone, a cheap reflex, and pretended the screen offered rescue. When the silence stretched too long, he folded. "Fine," he said. "Yes, my brother set up an aggregator for the vendors. We were going to reinvest the float in short-term instruments while the bills settled." Nobody was stealing. "It's called intelligent cash management." "You tried to pull the money at night," I said. "Intelligent thieves wear watches." His jaw tightened. Tiny muscles fluttered in his cheek. That's how pride looks when it finds the exit barred. He stepped close enough that I could see the careful stubble he shaved to look careless. "You think you can embarrass me?" "I'll walk, Robert. I will leave your daughter 30 hours before the wedding and tell everyone you scared me off with your small-town tactics. You will carry that, not me." Behind him, through the conference room glass, I saw the ballroom workers drape the last table with white linen, and for the first time since my wife died, I heard her voice clear as a bell in another room. "You don't have to win every fight, Rob. Just the one that keeps our girl whole." I stepped aside, opened the door, and spoke to the manager. "Send the vendors back," I said. "I have an announcement." They filed in with their clipboards and their careful expressions tuned to whatever the payer needed to see. "We're done," I said. "No wedding tomorrow. The father of the bride is canceling." The manager's face emptied of blood. The florist made a noise like a dropped spoon. Evan barked a laugh that failed halfway out. Ava didn't speak. Her hand found the edge of the table and gripped it as if the wood was the only thing in the room that wouldn't lie. "Dad," she whispered, hurt and disbelief braided tight. "What are you doing?" "Saving you," I said, and every word cost what it cost. From a man who thinks marriage is a cash machine with flowers. The vendors pivoted as one to the person they thought held the real power. Evan raised his palms again, a magician showing he had nothing up his sleeves. "This is a tantrum. Give us an hour. Take all the hours you want," I said. "Take the rest of your life. The accounts are frozen. The fraud report is filed. The police will want statements from anyone who touched the shell." That's when the second hook slid in, almost politely. My phone buzzed with a message from Angie. I opened it under the table and felt the floor drop in a way that didn't frighten me, because sometimes the ground has to go to show you what you've been standing on. The text said, "Side note, background pulled on your future son-in-law. There's a sealed case in another state. Fraud. He took a plea, expunged after diversion. Name changed 2 years ago. I'm sorry." I looked up and saw a young man using the face he'd built to hide the face he'd once worn. Ava saw something in my expression, and her own eyes filled a fraction. Not yet tears, just tide. "What?" she asked. "Dad, what is it?" "How do you break a bruise before it blossoms?" "Evan," I said, "tell my daughter your last name before you changed it." He laughed like he had practiced laughter as weaponry. "What are you even talking about?" "Tell her," I said, and the words were not loud, but they were heavy. He didn't. The silence told her its own story. She turned to me and back to him. I watched the thread between them fray, one fiber at a time, until it wasn't a thread at all. "Is this true?" she whispered. He said her name like a prayer or a sales pitch. Ava, is it true? Yes, he snapped finally, and then tried to soften it. But it's not what he's making it sound like. It was a startup thing that went sideways. Everyone does aggressive finance. Your dad wants to punish me for playing in a league he doesn't understand. I felt old in my bones and young in my will. Son, my league is putting roofs over women's heads that don't leak when the rain comes. My league is not bending the numbers until they stop telling the truth. He turned toward the door, perhaps to leave before the room finished seeing him. But it was too late. He'd shown us the man beyond the cufflinks. The vendors began to gather their papers, peeling off like birds when a shadow passes overhead. The manager reached for the phone with the fingers of a man who knows he will spend the next week explaining a hole shaped like a wedding. Ava's voice was small and impossibly steady. Please go, Evan. He glanced at me, then at the frozen door of his bright future, then back to her. The only person in the room who mattered, and who would not choose him. He tried to speak and failed, and then he was moving, and then he was gone. The ballroom swallowed the noise of his footsteps. The exit stayed closed a second longer than it needed to. Then it sighed, and the corridor took him away. The manager cleared his throat gently. There are cancellation fees. Send them to the LLC, I said, and the florist actually laughed once, sharp as a snapped twig. In that moment, every person in the room decided they wanted to work for me if anything in their lives ever burned down. After, when the signing and apologizing and refund arithmetic bled out, I took my daughter to the little chapel downstairs where the chairs were still stacked against the wall and the light through the high window made dust look like grace. She sat in the front row and held her veil in her lap like a napkin after a meal that didn't suit. We listened to the building breathe. Somewhere, a vacuum cleaner pushed and pulled at the edge of our private ruin. I'm sorry, I said. I should have seen it sooner. She shook her head. I should have too. I wanted to say all the things fathers say when they are trying to build a bridge over a river they can't swim. That she was still everything. That the day was not wasted if it saved the years. That love lives in the decision to stop a thing that harms you. But she knew and I knew, and words would only clap their hands to be seen. We left by the service exit. No one saw us. The alley held the afternoon heat and a smell of onions from the kitchen vent that felt more honest than 1,000 roses. I drove us home along streets I could navigate with my eyes closed. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. In the kitchen, she took off the veil and set it on the counter. It looked like a low cloud, and I wanted to step inside and disappear until I was just a man again, not a father who had failed and succeeded in the same hour. Do you hate me? She asked, not looking up. How could I hate what I'd run into fire for? She nodded once, and that was the end of that question. She went to her room. I went to mine. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with my hands on my knees, like a man who had come in from the fields, and only then remembered he no longer had a wife to tell him where to hang his hat. Night came. The phone lit and buzzed with numbers I didn't know. Lawyers with smooth voices. Vendors wanting to confirm paperwork. A reporter who had heard a rumor about a canceled wedding with high-profile guests. I turned the phone face down. Just before midnight, someone pounded on my door. It was Evan's brother, smaller than him and meaner, eyes like coins that had lost their shine. You made a mistake today, old man, he said, pushing the door with his mouth, not his hands. Unfreeze the account and we forget this. Forget? I said. You're standing on my porch asking for mercy you didn't offer in my house. Listen, he hissed, adjusting his jacket as if it could pull dignity up from his shoes. The float on this thing was legal until you made it illegal. Fees accrue. Reputations break. You want that for Ava? You want a circus? You brought the circus, I said. I just turned on the lights. Someone moved in the dark behind him. Another figure loomed near the curb. It felt like a scene I'd been in before, 30 years ago on a site where a developer tried to shave the foundation and thought a punch could substitute for a building code. I was younger then and faster. Now I had other tools. "Leave," I said, and when he smirked I added, "I filed a police report this afternoon with your name on it. While you were busy threatening me in theory, the notice went to a detective who owes me a favor after I fixed his mother's porch for free last winter. Do you want to see how quickly a sealed case can unseal when the pattern repeats?" He swallowed, the little brother suddenly, and glanced toward the car. The figure behind the wheel revved the engine like courage. They left. The next morning, I woke before dawn the way I did back when the plant whistles called men like bells. I made coffee and drank it in the quiet where my wife used to sit and make lists of things I rolled my eyes at and secretly admired. The house felt both too small and safe enough to bring a war back to. I prefer wars I can see. At 8 o'clock, the detective called. He had a voice like an old fence, reliable, a bit weathered. "You were right," he said. We tugged a thread. "Looks like your future son-in-law and his brother run a little side hustle, setting up shell companies to consolidate payments for weddings and corporate retreats. They hold the float, then vanish. The plea from 3 years ago. Let's just say the judge was merciful. I doubt he feels charitable now. Will there be charges? Soon as we get vendor statements. Your bank's freeze bought us time. I'll need your daughter's cooperation for a complaint. How's she doing?" Like someone who woke up from a dream and found it in her mouth still. "I'll be gentle." After I hung up, I called Ava. She came downstairs with her hair up and her eyes clear in a way I had not seen the entire engagement. She wore jeans and one of her mother's old sweaters, the sleeves too long, the cuffs pushed up the way her mother used to do when she kneaded dough. It was joyless and somehow holy. "I want to sign whatever I need to sign," she said. "I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else." We drove to the station together. On the way, she asked me questions I had no right answers for, only honest ones. "Did you always dislike him?" "I tried to like who you loved. I liked who you were with him when he wasn't in the room." "Why didn't I see it?" "Because you loved him." "Is love just blindness?" "Some of it. Sometimes it's memory. Sometimes it's hope dressed like a fact." She nodded and turned her face to the window, city sliding by with its busy life unaffected by ours. At the precinct, the detective laid out papers and a recorded statement, and my daughter spoke the truth in a voice that wavered once and then found its core. My chest hurt in a good way, the way it aches when a bone sets. By afternoon, the bank had reversed the suspicious transfers. Vendors called to say they were sorry for their part and grateful for mine. I told each of them we all do what we know until we know better. The florist cried and offered to send peonies to our house anyway, just because. I told her our kitchen wasn't a good place for fragile flowers. We were a sturdier bloom kind of family. 2 days later, Evan was arrested in an office lobby with glass walls and an espresso station. The news clip showed him looking smaller without his careful lighting. The camera panned to his brother in cuffs, eyes darting like a cornered hare. The story ran on local channels for a week, then faded the way sins do when new ones arrive. A week after the would-have-been wedding, Ava and I went back to the ballroom to pick up the dress. The manager met us with a kind of reverence that had nothing to do with money. He'd seen his share of broken nights. Most of them ended with shouting or silence that curdled into lawsuits. He shook my hand like a man who shook only when he meant it. "I told my daughter about you," he said. "She gets married next spring. We're paying in cash, no aggregators, no cousins with LLCS." We laughed, all three of us, and it felt like a step toward something not quite called joy. We drove home with the dress in the back seat, plastic whispering as the car hit bumps. At a stoplight, Ava said without looking at me, "I want to do something with that money." "The deposit you got back, what are you thinking?" "There's a community center near Mom's old clinic. They need a kitchen. A real one, not a hot plate in a dream. We could put your name on it." "Put her name," I said, and something in my chest found a place to rest. We did. By fall, the Margaret Hall kitchen served dinners to kids whose parents worked too late to cook. On the first night, a girl asked if she could stir the sauce, and Ava showed her how to hold the ladle with both hands, steady. I watched them from the doorway and let the smell of tomatoes and garlic fill the space where regret usually sat. Now, if you're looking for the part where I confess the satisfaction of revenge, here it is, but you will have to accept that it didn't taste like I imagined. It was not a parade with my face on the banner. It was quieter, steadier. It looked like my daughter sleeping through the night without waking to check her phone. It sounded like a knock on my door from a neighbor who said he'd heard about the kitchen and did I need help carrying boxes. It felt like a house that welcomed me every evening instead of echoing. Evan took a plea. His brother tried to be clever and failed. They paid fines, restitution, time supervised by men and women who had seen better cons from worse men. Their attorney sent a letter asking for leniency statements on behalf of their unusual family circumstances. We sent nothing. Some silences are generous and some are just true. For a while, Ava wore no rings. Then, one winter afternoon, she brought coffee to a man who was installing shelves at the community center and spent 20 minutes asking him questions about load-bearing brackets. I stood in the hall and watched her laugh the way she used to laugh when she was little and didn't know what a wedding cost. His name was David. He had calluses that told the truth. They took walks. They learned how to talk without selling anything. The first time he came to the house, he brought a pie that was ugly and perfect. He shook my hand like a person who had used his hands to do something besides count. One night, not long after, she asked me if I thought it was time to try love again. I told her love is like a tool you pick up when you need it and put down when it's dangerous. The trick is knowing which moment you're in. She smiled and said she wished I'd written instruction manuals for her whole life. I didn't tell her I had. They were called mornings spent showing her how to change a tire, afternoons teaching her that the smallest bolt can hold the largest beam, evenings telling her that strong doesn't mean hard, and that sometimes you cancel a wedding to save a marriage that hasn't been born yet. If you're still thinking about the night in the ballroom, the insult, the vanished money, the man with the cufflinks, remember this: a father doesn't have to break a jaw to win. Sometimes all he has to do is hold a line no one else can see, and tell the truth before another lie gets a ring on its finger. Do I ever replay the moment he called me useless? Yes. But now it ends differently. In my mind, I watch him form the word. I see him offer it like a gift he bought at a cheap store, and I hand it back. I point at the community kitchen with my wife's name above the door, the pots clanging like happy bells, and my daughter's voice steady and sure as she calls orders like a captain. Useless is a word men use when they want you to carry their weight without complaint. I carried my share, then I put it down. I carried my child out of a building that was burning, then I built something from the ashes that didn't look like a wedding at all. There's a picture on my refrigerator, a recent one. Ava is standing with a ladle in her hand, David beside her with a dish towel on his shoulder, both of them laughing as if the world is not a ledger but a song. I'm off to the side, doing what I do best, making sure the pilot light is steady and the door hinges don't squeal, leaning my ear toward the hum of a house that is, at last, whole. Sometimes people ask if we ever had a ceremony. We did, but not the kind you plan with a seating chart. One Saturday in spring, under a flowering tree that didn't know our names, a small circle of friends gathered behind the center. No rented tuxes, no quartet. A volunteer brought a guitar. We read promises that didn't cost anything. My daughter wore a blue dress she could walk in. She asked me to say something, so I did. I didn't talk about love. I talked about roofs and kitchens and hands. I said that a house is only a house when it keeps something safe. I said I had spent my life learning how to keep rain out and heat in and shame off the pillows of people I loved. When I was done, she hugged me the way she did when she was small and had scraped her knee on the driveway and needed to be told she would stop bleeding. After, we ate pie. It was ugly and perfect. I went home that night with something simple in my chest, where the elaborate plans used to sit. It felt like a good screw-driven, straight and true. On the mantel above the television, there's a small framed note from the manager of the old ballroom. He sent it the week after the arrest. It says, in tidy script, "Thank you for teaching my daughter what a father is supposed to do. We will never forget it. Neither will I. Not because I won a fight, because I didn't let my girl lose one she didn't realize she was in. And if you think the best part is the moment they carried him out in handcuffs, you're wrong. The best part is quieter. Every single time I see Ava smile without asking permission from the part of herself that used to make excuses for a man who measured love in invoices. The best part is the night the oven in the community kitchen failed, and I spent 2 hours with my arms inside its belly, cursing softly at a stripped screw until the pilot caught and the students cheered. The best part is not triumphant. It's useful. Old men like me aren't showy. We're ballast. When storms come, and they do, we keep the thing from capsizing. That night in the ballroom, I didn't sink him. He sank himself. I just made sure my daughter didn't go down with him. I still have the invoice folder from the wedding that never happened. It sits on a shelf in the hall closet beside the toolbox my father gave me when I was 17 and hungry to build. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the day's work is done, I open the closet just to look at both. One reminds me how easy it is to dress debt as celebration. The other reminds me that I know how to fix almost anything that breaks. Not everything. Almost. Every once in a while I think of the first question that cut me. That night by the mirrors, when I asked myself how my daughter could love a man who would speak to me like that. The answer is simple in the end. She loved him because she is capable of love. It took pain to teach her where to put it. That's the work of a father as much as any roof I ever put down. Showing where to put the weight so the structure holds. If you need a lesson from me, take this one. If a man calls you useless while standing in a room you paid for, take back the room. If he puts your child in danger and calls it finance, take back the money. If the world tells you the new way is cutting corners and closing eyes, keep yours open. Keep your lines straight. Keep your papers in order. Keep your courage where you can reach it in the dark. I am not useless. I am a father. And on the night my daughter's wedding vanished into thin air, that was exactly what she needed me to be.
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.